Hello, everyone. Welcome to the hotline, the Portuguese hotline, where you ask your language questions. So, today I'm going to be answering some of the questions that you guys have asked me, both on Instagram, my students, and via email from my Substack. And today is going to be only 30 minutes. But this is going to be recorded and I will be sharing the replay after. I have my camera here, so sometimes I'll be looking to the side because I need to see my notes and I need to see the questions that people have asked me. So if you have any questions, if you have any doubts, feel free to send them in the chat and I'll be very happy to answer all of your questions. Okay, so let's see the first question. One of these questions was from Jack, and he asked me, what is the deal with the preposition a between verbs? Okay, so for those who need a little bit of context in this, the preposition in between verbs has to do with situations like, for instance, eu estou a comer. And what happens is this it will work as a little glue in between verbs. And the main purpose of it is actually to create a continuous tense out of anything. So whenever you see a main verb and then a plus an infinitive connected, you will have a continuous tense. Okay, this can't happen to every single verb, okay? So the a plus infinitive cannot connect to any main verb. There are a few specific examples, like the verb começar to begin or the verb estar to give you the present continuous, like in English. But by norm, every time you have an a plus an infinitive, it means that it's the ing form from English, okay? So, okay. Let's see what else. Then we have another question here from my Instagram because I did a little bit of a survey today to see potential questions for anyone who then won't be able to be here but will be at the replay. I'll still answer their questions. And the first one, or the next one actually, is learning how to speak Portuguese without living in Portugal. Okay, so you can still learn Portuguese while being abroad and not having anyone to speak to. It will make it a little bit more difficult, but you can, for instance, start by. So let's go from in two perspectives, one where you have a teacher with you and one where you self teach yourself. Maybe let's start with the self-teaching part. So you can use a grammar, you can use YouTube, you can use blogs that teach you Portuguese, you can use apps, including. Uh, and you should focus a little bit on the functionality of the language. So you need to think a little bit about how you speak your own language, whatever that language is on your day to day, and see what could be useful for you in that method. So when then you start analyzing the way you speak, you will know where to focus when it comes to speaking Portuguese. And then you can choose those things. In terms of speaking, then, which is normally the most complicated part paired with the listening, there's two situations that you can also use there. You can either speak to yourself, which can be a little bit unpractical because you won't have feedback, or you can use some of the language apps that are available to us, like, for instance, Talk, Tandem, and find someone who is from Portugal that can help you practice the language, and you can do video calls with them, you can message them, text them, or something like that. On the other hand, you can always then go to any platform like Preply or italki and hire a teacher to talk to you, or someone, in some apps you have what's called a teacher, a community teacher, where you can pay them to talk to you. And sometimes in specific countries, you have areas where you have Portuguese people and you have Portuguese communities that you can find via Facebook, and then try to go there and speak with them. On the other side, with a tutor, what happens is once you start learning Portuguese with a tutor, technically the tutor should guide you through the process and help you practice at the same time that you're learning Portuguese on its own. Okay. But that also needs to then be complemented with having more people. It could be more teachers, it could be practicing buddies, accountability buddies you find online, it could be people within the community that is close to you. And very often you are able to find Portuguese people living abroad a little bit almost everywhere. And Facebook groups are actually a really good way for you to find Portuguese people living outside of Portugal. You can see in your own country if you can find someone that is within one of those groups, and check around and see if you find someone that fits that. So, in those cases, again, for the speaking, that's what I can advise you to do. But on the other hand, when it comes to listening, it's very important that you immerse yourself in the language. And that can be by listening to YouTube, by watching movies in Portuguese, by listening to podcasts in Portuguese. And those things are all available online. So the more you do it, the easier it gets for you to start understanding and get surrounded by the language, immerse yourself through the language, but also feel more connected to it and then develop further in your Portuguese journey. Okay, so those are some of the things that I can advise you to do. Now, next question. I have an interesting list of questions here. Okay, so what resources are actually good for European Portuguese versus Brazilian Portuguese, and how do I filter them? Okay, so there's some cool apps that you can use. Okay, and those would be, for instance, Drops and Memorize. They have European Portuguese. You could check on websites that have the PT extension, which are clearly European Portuguese. Now, another thing that you can do is check for potential things that will give you a clue whether if it is European Portuguese or Brazilian Portuguese. There is one trick that I normally use very commonly, which is the circumflex, the little one that looks like a hat, the that graphic mark. In Brazilian Portuguese, it tends to be overused, and so by norm, I already know which words in Portuguese don't have it and which ones in Brazilian do. So I tend to check that to see in normal day to day when I go to a bookshop or something, I tend to use that as a guide for me to understand if it's European Portuguese or if it is Brazilian Portuguese. Now, that can also go a little bit wrong because we also use that graphic mark. So the second way that it will be eventually more better, it would be better for you to use is the way they use the present continuous in European Portuguese and Brazilian Portuguese is very different. So, if it's Brazilian Portuguese, you would see something like estou comendo. So, the overuse of the gerund. If it is European Portuguese, it's going to be estou a comer. So, that allows you to right away understand if something is Brazilian Portuguese or European Portuguese. And all of this in writing. Okay, so all of this in written form. In spoken form, you will see that European Portuguese has a bigger sharpness than Brazilian Portuguese. So, what does that mean? For instance, in Brazilian Portuguese, you have a j sound. Then in Portuguese is not as common. We have more of a sharp, like a t, a d, and things like that. Okay. And then in Portuguese, sometimes we tend to say that Brazilian Portuguese is very mellow, very sweet, very honeyish, and the sense that everything is in it's enunciated, everything is pronounced. In European Portuguese, you will feel like we're eating words. So that's another way of understanding. If you are not very advanced in the language, that's another way. If you feel like the word or something is very sharp and not fully pronounced and very fast, very much probably that will be European Portuguese. Okay. Okay, how should I build a learning routine so I can progress steadily? So, you need to somehow create accountability, especially if you have ADHD like me. We're very good at not being good with habits. So, it's difficult for us to be able to build this routine. One of the tricks is make it as easy as possible. If you can stumble on something and start like practicing Portuguese, amazing. Make it as easy as you can to be with Portuguese, whether it is by using an app, by setting a timer. You could also have a podcast ready to go, YouTube, something that is just clicking once and there you have it. Sometimes you can have newsletters. I have a newsletter that you can sign up to down in the description. I don't send it very frequently, but you have a lot of resources there that you can just pick on and then listen. And you go with a click on the app, you listen to them, and then you can just do one a day. It's less than 5 minutes. It's good for practicing. And it takes the time for you to decide, kind of like, okay, how am I going to structure this class? How am I going to study this? You literally have everything you need to kind of like practice all the aspects of the entire language. But on the other hand, like for instance, if you have a little book story or an audiobook, something that you can keep beside you with you at all time, when you have boring moments, you can pick it up and do it. I would like to say that it's easy to build this routine. It's not, because after a certain extent of time, you'll get frustrated and it will be a little bit of a hard work. And so, because of that, we need to make it easier for us to be able to build this routine. So, try to pick on little things, and of course I cannot say do this or do that, because everyone is different, and especially with ADHDers we have different triggers. And potentially one of my students already knows this is for her, but like body doubles are amazing at that. If you have someone that helps you be accountable and be like, have you studied Portuguese today, like almost like Duolingo when he starts harassing you to study Portuguese, that would be amazing. um, what you can do also, but again, it depends how much self-discipline you have, is writing a journal. When I have my students, the first thing I tell them to do is to write a journal, because that is very good for you to develop your writing habits, to see potential gaps, potential difficulties that you have, and then try to talk about it after you write it down. This practice can also be done by sending an audio to someone. It could be your teacher, it can be someone that speaks European Portuguese, for a check or feedback. Okay. Nowadays, with AI is also super awesome, because you can just have a conversation with ChatGPT. Make sure to be specific, it's European Portuguese. And it can give you exercises, conversations that stimulate your learning. And even now, you have in ChatGPT the possibility to have memos. So you can literally get an email every single day telling you at a specific time to study Portuguese or come have a conversation with me. That's good. I do that for my languages when I need to practice, because sometimes I forget or I'm get too busy and I lose track of time. You get that email, it's super cool. Um should I focus on fluency first or perfect grammar and pronunciation? It depends on what you mean by fluency. That's my first question. That's my first note. Perfect grammar and pronunciation. Okay. The thing with perfect grammar at this point is that even sometimes Portuguese people have difficulty in creating perfect grammar. So I wouldn't say that you need to focus on any of these specifically. Yes, pronunciation is important, but once you get the basics and you get the gist of it, you should actually then be able to start practicing and structure your Portuguese in a way that you can put sentences together. There is no point in you over focusing in pronunciation if that's going to stop you from then putting a sentence together, if you're overthinking the way you say things and you won't be actually communicating anything. Is more efficient for you to just go and say it and then get someone to correct you, or then you, after you finish the sentence, you self correct yourself, than to focus too much and then you only have three words coming out of you in 1 minute. That's not very doable, and that's not very nice for you if you're talking about speaking a language. Okay. All of these things that I said so far can apply to any language, really. But in European Portuguese, normally what I do to my students is I give them a specific set of structures that they can use to start talking. And then I can start correcting them as they speak. So basically, if you speak and then get someone to correct you, that will help you improve faster than if you focus just on that specific point. Ideally, you work everything at the same time. If you feel overwhelmed, then maybe let's split it into just getting words together, being able to form a sentence, even if it's a bit shaky in the way you pronounce things. Don't worry too much about it. That correction will come. But there is a fun system and a very interesting system that you can use to avoid overthinking pronunciation. And later on, maybe in December, I'm going to be doing a workshop on that I will announce on my Substack. So then, if you want to be announced, if you want to know more about that, you can subscribe, and then you'll get an email explaining everything about it. Because this is indeed one of the main things that a lot of my students struggle with, and it would be very, very good for them to. It's very good for people to know these things, so that you have a proper system. Um, okay. Now, next question here is, why do I struggle to understand people from Portugal even when I know the words? Okay, two things. One, they speak too fast. Yes. So that's one thing that with immersion and with exposure to the language, you'll start being able to get used to it. The more you immerse yourself in that, the better you are at processing it. Now, the way you learn how to pronounce words, how to read, will influence the way you understand and how you understand the listening. Okay. What do I mean by this? I've seen too many times people addressing Portuguese alphabet as the same way as they address their mother tongue, especially if they come from European countries, certain European countries, because not all of them have the same alphabet as us, and especially from an English background. Normally, people who have a different alphabet than we do, they are better at pronunciating words because they don't make assumptions of something. So they literally have to learn the alphabet and the patterns of the words. When you already know the Latin alphabet, what ends up happening is you make assumptions of what something should actually sound like. And when you try to listen and it doesn't match what is your assumption is, you don't process, you don't understand. So if you then adapt and create some codes, again, I'll explain this in the workshop later in December. If you create and you put down the patterns of what you hear and you kind of like get to put things together, you will be able to understand how everything is going to sound, and you'll be able to associate a sound with a specific word. Okay, so in listening, we cannot skip steps. We literally need to be able to first see the sound as it is. Okay, so if I hear something, I'm like, okay, I write down in the way that I hear it in my own alphabet. Then I try to find out what the actual graphic writing is. It's there. Okay, then I see, okay, so this graphic, this word sounds like this in my perception. And then you attribute a meaning to it. And once you do that, you will see that later on, you will be able to understand this word and process it. Of course, with continuation, you need to actually immerse yourself into the very diverse patterns and connectors that, as you all know, like we do fuse words together. And once you start getting in touch with all of those specific patterns, you are going to start recognizing and processing things. But again, you need to do that link. Okay, you can't skip the steps and think like, oh no, because I know this alphabet, I need to know this right away. No, you can't skip steps. Okay, so we have another question here. When I speak, I'm consistently worried about tense, and I can't seem to get the conjugation right with tense and subject. How can I improve that? Um, okay, so, what do you mean by subject in this sense? Like, for instance, you can't associate, let's say, I had a case of that today, which is foi and fui. And you don't understand if it's eu fui or il foi or something like that. If that is the case, maybe it's because one way for you to improve in that, maybe start with the tense to the subject situation, is use the subject with the actual verb. Okay, let's do that first. Because there is no point in you omitting something that you still don't understand how to put. I normally tell my students, put everything by written. Okay, it's true that we then will skip it later on, but this will allow you to keep on practicing and using the subject with the correct verb. Okay, right on that. That will be a way for you to improve into associating eu with the right conjugation, tu with the right conjugation, and so forth. The second thing is, and this will be in the sense if you're thinking about tenses, there's a lot of tenses in Portuguese, as you all know, sometimes too many, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. My idea is you need to keep it simple at the beginning. You need to understand what they stand for, because a lot of the times the tenses that you have to think a lot about are actually not translatable in English, which gives you the difficulty. So you need to understand what they stand for. What is their concept? For instance, you might be familiar with the tense of the present tense in Portuguese is used to talk about facts. Okay, so if you're thinking about, okay, is this a fact? Is this true? Then you use the present tense. If we're thinking about the past tense, it's something that is just there in the past. It doesn't affect anything forward. Then you have two options, the perfeito or the imperfeito. Okay. And then the future, that one is obvious. Now, the thing is, for you to be able to automate this and improve this, you need to do some active effort into thinking about what's happening and then communicate it in writing. For instance, writing makes it more makes it easier, because then you kind of like see it in front of you, you process it. It might be a little bit more work, but it will be more efficient for you to work on that. The other thing is, you can read a lot and then ask yourself, why did they use the tense here? What does this mean? What are they trying to communicate with me? Okay, because a lot of the times in Portuguese, it's not necessarily that you're using a tense wrong. For instance, let me re explain this. In a lot of the fill in the gaps exercises, um, you sometimes, I'm thinking about past tenses, for instance, in this case, perfeito versus imperfeito. You can actually use both, and both would be correct, but both would communicate something different. So, what you do in those cases is you need to think, okay, so if I use perfeito, what am I communicating? If I use imperfeito, what am I communicating? Okay. And that's one of the reasons why I don't like these exercises, because they kind of like put you in this idea of something is completely right, something is completely wrong, when that's actually mm, that's not realistic and that's not correct, and confuses you more than normal. If you, instead of doing these exercises, you go and you read something, and then you're like, okay, so what is this trying to tell me? What is this trying to communicate? Because you're processing something that is being said to you, you start understanding the different ways you can use it. It makes it easier for you to start using these tenses. Okay. Then, of course, if you want to practice more, you can do the drills. Okay, the verb drills. Eu como, eu comi, eu andei, and all of those things, to kind of like get that automation of the verbs, the conjugations of the verbs. But ultimately, for tenses, you need to write something down. You need to read something. It's not that black and white. There is some gray in the middle that you need to understand, that if you use one or the other, they will communicate two different things, even though necessarily they are not wrong. Okay. But that's another topic that I can then speak in a specific workshop or another class. So if that's the case, then I can do something like that also. Um, so, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but hopefully I did. If it's not clear, let me know. Um, Now, what else? Um, okay, so how do I know? Oh, I love this one. How do I know when to use the verbs ser and estar in European Portuguese? Okay. This is my favorite topic in the Portuguese language, because this is the reason why I ended up reading. I went down a rabbit hole and I ended up reading a bunch of papers on linguistics about these two verbs, and I had to go back into Roman times to understand what these actually were used for, and what they stand for. But I will save you the trouble of going through all that explanation, and I'll be very simplistic. Ser is anything that we can attribute to the fundamental of someone. So anything that someone fundamentally is ser. Okay. Um, One of my students, he summarized this dimension in two very interesting ways. So if you say you are something, by norm, it's ser. If you could say you are being something, then it's estar. um Going back, that's the easiest way that he found to see the difference between these two. Going back to the ser, the fundamental trait of someone, and this has nothing to do with permanency versus temporary. Okay, that is a misconception that people have been teaching, and that's actually not correct, because for instance, the concept of being alive or being dead in Portuguese is actually estar, and according to that explanation, they couldn't be, because they are seen as permanent situations. They are states. But on the other hand, if we're talking about being young, being old, being a teenager, being a child, we use with ser. And that's also against what people normally teach. So the idea is nothing to do with permanent versus temporary, rather, with being a fundamental characteristic of something or anything else, basically. Okay, so that's the easiest way for you to look at it, because then there are specific situations where I want to highlight that someone is being fundamentally something during a specific period of time. And that's also correct because this is a fun thing, which is I could say, for instance, tu estás a ser irritante. Okay, you are being annoying. And we are attributing the fundamental annoying state. Okay, as well, I could say tu és irritante. Okay. Now, if I then just use estás irritante, I'm trying to tell you that today or for now, this time, you are being annoying. The difference here is how much you want to mark that concept. Are you trying to make it like part of someone's personality for that time and be like, stop it? Or you're just like making some fun jokes about it and you're trying to kind of like um, annoy them a little bit too by saying that. Okay. So again, fundamental core characteristic of something or someone, and it can be used for everything. This is very conceptual versus then the estar. Okay. Any tips to improve vocabulary? Yes, read a lot, study a lot of texts. If you can, immerse yourself with listening and get the transcripts for it, which sometimes I know it's difficult, and I'm trying to provide more of those for you guys. You can listen and study the text at the same time. Again, we tend to learn better when we associate something new to something we know. So by reading, we are actually able to do that, and it will be easier for us to memorize vocabulary. So if you do like a paragraph at a time of a book or something like that, it will help you gather more vocabulary. And you will also be able to see how to use that vocabulary. People talk to me about flashcards. It's not that as there's anything wrong with flashcards, not at all. Personally, I don't like them for a reason, because you won't be seeing the words in their own functionality. You won't be seeing them in the way they are being used. And that is not good because there is no point in you knowing 300 words if you can't put them in a sentence. Okay? So, it's better even if you use smaller sentences and you add the words and you use them and you make them simpler. That will help you then memorize vocabulary and learn how to use the vocabulary. Okay, so that's one of the good benefits of that. Um, what else? Okay. Um, okay, so another one. I can understand some Portuguese, but when I try to speak, I freeze. What can I do? That is very common. That is mainly it. There can be a lot of reasons for that. One can be insecurity, which you need to work. A lot of the times in my classes, I don't just do actual classes. I need to go through this because you need to be confident. You need to understand and be comfortable with the structure. That's why I give formulas to my students and start getting them on and start my students on them right away so that you can feel comfortable and build the confidence on it. Don't try to overwhelm yourself by trying to sound exactly as you are in your native language. That's not going to happen. Okay. In the same way that you don't expect a child to know how to speak right away, you can't expect yourself to also do the same thing. Um, it will take time and practice for you to get there. Um, and normally, this can stem from lack of exposure, also, or perfectionism, which is also another situation. Okay, but that has to do also with the insecurity. Perfectionism is normally not very good for whomever is learning languages, because let's face it, we will not be perfect. Even after these many years of me speaking English, I still struggle sometimes and I still make mistakes. So that's perfection is not something that we'll ever achieve. And even some Portuguese people sometimes can't even organize their own thoughts and communicate perfectly. So take that pressure off of you in that sense. But at the same time, like, if you focus on getting simple things first, and then as you feel the anxiousness and the freezing get out of your body as you speak and get more confident, you can then start making it a little bit more complicated and you can start leveling up on the complicated sides of it. Okay, don't try to speak exactly as your native tongue right away. That will make you freeze and that will stop any potential growth that you might have. You'll end up getting stuck, and that's not good for everyone, for anyone really, in any of the developments. Okay. um so We're almost over. We have 1 minute for the mark of the 30. And for today, I'm going to finish now because I'm also starting to have almost no voice today because today is just me and you guys talking. And I want to do this more often, at least once a week, but I will be having a few things to deal with for the next few weeks. So I will be posting on my Substack when I have new lives with dates, and it will potentially be in Thursdays, Fridays, or Saturdays. So I will keep you posted on when the next live is. Feel free to send any questions through email, Substack, or Instagram, and I will be answering them in the live. And again, anything, let me know. Any information that you want or you need, it's in the description box. And I will see you next live session. So, bye bye.